Hello, everybody. This is Sasha. I am so happy to have with me again because we have a previous conversation that was so amazing that you have to check out. With me again, this amazing, powerful woman that I adore so deeply, Samantha Bryan from the Scottish
Hi.
Song Project. Hi.
Thank you for having me. I love you.
Oh, I love you too so much. If you haven't checked out our previous conversation about female anger, you totally need to. It's such a powerful conversation and one of the favorites of people that have listened to it. So
Is
definitely
it?
link. Yes, people have heard it and gone like, oh my God, it was so important for me to listen to this right now. So, yes.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Yay. Thanks, everyone.
So one of the topics that we have been going back and forth together on our social media is gender, because that's something that has been a passion of both of us in different ways. Samantha is studying actually gender studies in university. Is it right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess like informally, right? Because the only form of education doesn't need to be from an institution. There's all kinds of learning that's completely valid and real. And so outside of an institution, I've been studying, women, gender, and sexuality for at least like 10 years now. I think I've always been very interested in women and gender, especially because of my upbringing. My mom's a very strong feminist, leans more towards second wave feminism because of her generation, but like still, that was a really interesting foundation for me growing up. So I was just always very present for that. I was also raised in a partially pagan household, Wiccan household, because of her practices and her leanings. So I had a front seat to that. And then, I got older and like the art I became involved in, I became a big part of the Boston burlesque community. And you can't be in the Boston burlesque community and not be a feminist, regardless of your sex or gender, wherever you are on either of those spectrums. You just can't successfully be in that community and not just become a devoted feminist. So, I've been studying through that channel for a long time, of course, reading books and supplementing and traveling, and then working on the Scarlet Tongue Project and learning from all the incredible women and queer folks that I meet doing that. So all of that has led me to finally re-enrolling in a university here. And so I have a concentration right now in women, gender, and sexuality, which I love.
Oh, see why I have to invite her. So yes, and I think it's such an important topic in the spiritual community. So
Yes.
what got us together the most was this frustration, because every time that I read you are so feminine, you are so masculine, you're in your masculine right now. Well, you're in your feminine, that man is emotional, so he's in his feminine. I could just start having internal convulsions. Like, stop saying that. That is upsetting. That is so limiting.
Limiting.
Yeah, it's like women are emotional, men are intellectual. So if a woman is intelligent, she's in her masculine. Like, do you even realize how castrating, how limiting, and how damaging that is to both men and women?
Yeah. No, it's just offensive and it's outdated. I know that we're trying to use language that is like a reclaiming of that, by being like, being in my feminine means I love that I'm emotional and I love that I'm slower and I love that I'm abstract and whimsical and I love that I'm softer and nurturing. I love these qualities. You know what I mean? Like, okay, good. And you should. They're beautiful things. But can someone else love them as well? Like, what is it? Does that like fundamentally change them? And also too, like understand like the same qualities. And this is the part where we have to start questioning things. It's not that you can't love those traits, because those are beautiful traits. If you extract them from gender, they're just ways of being a human in the world. And those are beautiful things. But understand it becomes political right? Like in your acceptance and celebration of it because you're a woman, you know, like I love this trait because I'm a woman, you know, whatever. And also recognizing that not that long ago, and even still, those traits are insults. Those are insults, you know, because you're a woman was used to put women down, to oppress them, to not take them seriously, to harm them, to commit violence against them, you know, and these other things. So it's like, it's not an attack. So, right, when we start to discuss gender and all these things, it's not criticizing those traits. It's giving a critique, and it's questioning, you know, like, why is that connected with being a woman, and how has that been used to harm us? How has that been used to limit us? And like, yes, you're celebrating, but are you reclaiming that? Are you conscious of the history you're reclaiming that from? You know, and I think if we're conscious that it's reclaiming in the way that we present these things, then it is very powerful. Like, you know, yes, actually, you've been right this whole time. Women are naturally softer. Women are naturally nurturing. Women are naturally more whimsical. Like, I love it now. It sounds like, thank you, patriarchy, for showing me the light. Like, I will stay in my place. This is beautiful. I don't need you anymore. Like, what? That's garbage. I'm plugging my computer in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's, I mean, my oversimplified 2 cents about that, but that's just.
And then the upsetting part is that when a woman shows traits that are, in quotations, masculine,
Mm-hmm.
it's and she's driven, she's strong, she has a lot of fire in the belly, she has this passion about a certain topic, she's intelligent and brilliant and educated, and she's ambitious, and she's good with business, and the first thing that people tell her is, oh, you're in your masculine.
You're in your masculine.
And she's supposed to be flattered. Oh, yeah, well, yeah, I'm in my masculine. In reality, no woman wants to be told that she's masculine, and no man wants to be told he's feminine, even except if they are working on their inter you know, like moving out of the gender box, right? But if you're telling a woman, oh, you're intelligent, then you're masculine, and a man, oh, you are emotional, then you're feminine, even if that man might be queer, it's like, yeah, but my emotions are necessarily feminine. I was born with emotions even before before I knew about my desire to or my needs, I just was born with emotions. But are you telling me that my emotions are just feminine? Aren't men capable of feeling emotions as well? So
yeah, and you see everywhere. Hold on, I'm plugging this in. Men are like limited in the emotions they're allowed to have, so they just are on level 11 in like their 3 emotions they're allowed to have, rather than just like let it spread out in like the whole range. And that doesn't mean fundamentally they don't have them. That doesn't mean naturally men don't have these. I think that's wicked fucking offensive to assume like, oh, men can't access emotions. Men don't have these emotions. Yes, they do. It's just been beaten out of them. And not only by other men, not only by their fathers and patriarchy and their mothers or whatever, by other women. You know, I was talking to my partner not too long ago about how like women, especially in heterosexual relationships, will perpetuate, you know, like these stereotypes of, you know, like the man needs to be strong. She doesn't want to date a pussy. You know, he was telling me like, if like, you know, he were to go out and like see one of his guy friends or something, you know, his girlfriend would be like, oh, did you see buddy? Did you see your boyfriend? You know, like, oh, like a man having friends means he's like automatically gay, but also like that's homophobic, right? To like be mocking them, like, you know, you got a boyfriend. Like, first of all, like what is all of that? What is like all the fucking layers of that? You know, so it's like, we're all complicit, you know, our society as a whole, you know, in Western society, we're complicit.
yeah, and in that sense, when I hear the question, oh, do women really want their men to be vulnerable? Oh no, it's a turn off to have a man being too vulnerable. You don't want a whiny man. It's like, they are capable of emotions. We shouldn't be speaking about their capacity to have emotions our capacity to welcome them in their emotions. That should be just given. But then they are afraid of being considered less of a man if they are, and that's such an issue because men are so afraid of this label, masculinity. Am I man enough? Is this manly enough? Will I be considered less of a man if I express this emotion? And then we come with this new age movement with the idea that, well, yeah, if you're emotional, you're in your feminine. What does it do to a man that is already questioning his capacity to feel like a man? Again, with quotations, right? Like, because I know that it's such, in this time, gladly, we are moving out of these boxes, but these spiritual movements are creating a bigger box instead of letting us move out of the box.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like in so many of these spiritual communities, and I think, okay, so religion is always a reflection of the culture at the time, right? And so it's like these spiritual beliefs that we believe that God or the universe like bestowed onto us, right? That we take as like truth. Like it's just, I think we've talked about this on the phone. It's really just energy being filtered through our cultural perspectives, right? So like in a lot of these, spiritual circles, it's like the woman gets to just be free. She gets to be nature. She gets to be the ocean. And the man gets to learn how to be the container. The masculine is the container and the protector, right? And like we build whole rituals out of this, right? So when a man is in his masculine, it's like, oh yes, step forward, divine God, divine masculine. We need you to keep us safe while we work our silly lady magic, or it's like, or I don't know, whatever it is. But if a man is in his feminine, I don't know if this happens in circles you've been, but there's always this degree of leaving him alone. And it's very subtle. When a man is in his masculine, everyone's like, ooh, I'm so turned on. That's super hot. Look at him. He's strong. He's protecting us. It's like, I don't know. It feels like a cock in his hens. Like it's just silly. And it's like, oh yeah, come here. We need you. But then when he's like, I'm feeling really in my feminine, like we leave him alone, because it's like, oh, he's in his feminine. Like let's let him fall into the background because he's not serving the purpose like his body should serve, or like, oh, he doesn't have much of a purpose. Like let's let him like fold in with everyone else, not even like, oh, would you like to have the lead then in this dancing part? Would you like to have the lead then in this singing part? Would you like to call the goddess in? It's not. It's just like, oh, Scott is in his feminine, so he's going to take a nap.
Yeah.
Like weird, but if a woman is and if a woman is like, I'm so in my feminine right now, everyone's like, goddess, and they like lose their shit and they're like, I can see her. I can see the goddess coming through. Can you?
Yeah.
Can you? Or is she just the hot babe that you want her to be? Is she just conforming the way you want her to? And you're not seeing the goddess coming through, or maybe you are, I don't know, but like, maybe it's just like a cis woman feeling confident in her body, and that aligns with your, ideas about how the world works. So you're just like, this is powerful.
Yeah.
Is that more powerful than a man in his feminine, And then when a woman's in her masculine, I think we also reward her. I think there's a moment of fear, right? Because it's like, oh, she's straight.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she's bossy, she's straight, she's aggressive, something's up with her. Like, I wonder what's going on at home, like whatever. Or there's a reward. Like, you've transcended womanhood. You are better than the other women because you get things done. You're better than the other woman. You're better, you're higher, you're at another tier, So it's like, it's also hypocritical.
Absolutely. I love how clearly you stated. And
was that clear? I feel like I was rambling. Sorry.
Absolutely clear. And it's also painful for the person. There is this shaming that goes behind that. There is this shaming for a man that is being called too vulnerable, too feminine. And there is this shaming for a woman that is being too masculine, because it's like, well, yeah, you're so much in your masculine right now. Like if she was standing in something unnatural, like if it was not her nature. And then they say, well, we all have masculine and feminine. That's such a misunderstanding on the way in which energy actually moves. Energy doesn't have feminine and masculine. Energy is energy. Energy just moves. And people use a lot the idea of the yin and yang, but they have no clue of how the yin and yang actually function. It's like,
I love this.
yes, the yin and yang are actually ever moving energies that turns one into the other. It's just the yin is constantly turning into yang, and the yang is constantly turning into yin. And they are more about the nature of the universe, like cold and warm, water, fire, than about gender. When have you seen the water actually being a gender?
Well, that's what waves are.
Yeah.
That's what waves are. They're just sea dicks, just coming and then going to shore.
But people are like so, and there's when this limiting idea of religion comes, that says, well, the sun is masculine, yeah, the earth is feminine, and that's limiting and ignorant, because in reality, in previous religions, in their origins of religion, the sun was feminine, and eventually it had a masculine counterpart, and everything, and even the earth was masculine, and it had a feminine eventually a counterpart. So it's like we start just there is this quote that I love that says, "Are we creating God to our resemblance, or are we actually being created to her resemblance?" Because in reality, we speak about the divine according to our limitations. Just what we are capable of seeing is what we express about what we understand about the universe. And that it's like all the archaeologists refer to their historical discoveries just limited to their perception and to their religion and to their understanding. So they cannot understand why a goddess would be treated as an entity that was intelligent, that was a warrior, that was fierce, when in their understanding women didn't have those qualities. But all the way back before patriarchy took over, those were the qualities that were assigned to women. Women were known to be intelligent, to be capable of great warrior skills, and to be the ones that were in charge of politics, that were in charge of creating this, of having property, of having, of managing wealth. And it was until patriarchy came that they said, oh, women are so emotional that they are incapable of having power over wealth. They are incapable of speaking in public. They are incapable of having a voice in politics. And they created a god that resembled all the masculine ideas that they hold so dear. And they removed those qualities from the goddesses, so that we don't have any representation that makes us know that we are capable of having that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like it varies in so many different cultures around the world too. I think many of us think in terms of like Western society and how things have been, but have matrilineal traditions and cultures and everything else. And it's different from matriarchal. I think a lot of women in spiritual circles focus on like this like fantasy matriarchal society that like never really existed. But there are so many societies that do and have just treated gender differently. It's just a totally different approach. But I guess go back. Sorry, I'm digesting everything you said. I lost my train of thought. In Western society, you and I have talked about this at least. going all the way back, like when you're saying like how they statues of men and they took, attributes away from women and less representation, you can see this transition mythology change. Suddenly mythology was all about like the conquering of the evil woman, right? And like that went around the same time when like women were being treated differently in society. Suddenly they were, second class. Suddenly they were the nature that needed to be conquered. And what you and I were discussing previously is like how these attributes became divided based on bad medicine in ancient Greek culture. And here I'm only speaking about like Western society. I can't speak to like other cultures outside. I'm definitely not an expert, but and I'm not an expert in this either. This is my limited information. So like just based on shitty understandings of medicine, primitive medicine, they were like, oh, okay, well, men are this way and women are this way. So you have these traits and men have these traits, and, men have the ability to just, transcend the body and be this brilliant mind and know absolute truths and just understand the ways of the world. And you crazy beast, randomly bleed periodically. Suddenly, like another human grows in your stomach. Don't know how that happened, and like, or like a very primitive idea of like all this happened. So women, because they didn't understand women, they didn't understand their bodies and everything, they just get cast into the shadows because you're like, you're not understandable. This is scary. And so with that motion of casting them into the shadows as something they didn't understand, they're like, oh, while we're throwing out the trash, take these other traits with you that are inconvenient and we feel bad about them. So you're emotional. Take that one. We don't like emotion. You're indecisive. We don't like that one. So you take that one too. So and that's just stuck around. It's just stuck around. And there's this attachment in a lot of spiritual communities with seeing like ancient mythology as like some kind of truth, not as cultural commentary and storytelling. So they're like, well, the ancients did it this way. Well, the ancients had like limited science and they were kind of fucked. That's right. So it's just like, so I think like a lot of religions actually perpetuate these cultural beliefs of this division between the sexes, even though as we're finding out in science, like there aren't, I'm not finding out, but like as is being more spoken about in mainstream conversations, there aren't two sexes anyway, so that concept in and of itself where it's like, people are becoming a little more comfortable with like, oh, well, gender is non-binary and you can have whatever traits you want, and whatever, but like sex is sex and you have male and female at the end of the day. And now we're starting to have more conversations and science is becoming more mainstream now. Like, well, you know what, even sex isn't binary anyway. So like, what is this? This is garbage, like let's start taking that apart. But yeah, so we're hanging on in Western society, we're hanging on to, at least in part, largely like these ancient Greek views based on bad science about how reproduction worked.
Yeah. And that we're totally it's just like taking this little piece in the story of humanity and taking it and repeating it like the absolute truth, like those hundreds of years where philosophers were thinking that way, and thinking that before they came with that illuminating, enlightening wisdom, everything was barbarism, right? Like, oh my God, they were so primitive. When in reality, there were cultures that were so advanced, so intelligent, so wise, so wealthy, that were flourishing before they came and that were doing things differently and had a whole different mythology and had a whole different cosmovision of the world, of the universe. I was so blown away when I read that in the years from the 3000 to the 1500 year before Christ in Egypt, it was the first dynasties, the first 10 dynasties in Egypt were matrilineal, and therefore the queen was the one that was above the king. The term pharaoh came from the house. She was the house. It was a term for the queen, for the woman, based on the goddess Isis, who was the one throne of where everything came to existence from. And that it was women who had the access to wealth, to politics, that they would give children to men right away when they were little so that they would take care of the kids. So men would stay at home, take care of the kids, weave, and they would be the ones seduced into marriage. The women would write poetry to men in order to seduce them to marry them. So we are holding one truth nowadays, holding it like the one undivided truth that speaks about the traits of the masculine and feminine, but we're not looking that this piece comes from a very limited view of a culture that took over violently over the cultures that were already thriving years before. That had a whole different opposite perception. So who is right and who's wrong about how a woman is supposed to be, about what feminine is supposed to be and masculine is supposed to be. The Egyptian that thought that the woman was brilliant and capable of having amazing decisions, or the one that said that women were just emotional, and if she had the capacity to think, it was because she's in her masculine. So what are we replaying and reproducing once and again as reality? We can choose to take another narrative, a narrative that is not limiting and that is not that damaging to the roles in quotation that we should be playing.
Right, absolutely. And I think like knowledge is power, right? Like I think so many of us in Western society just assume that our experiences and the baseline education we have is just how the world works because it's all we're exposed to, right? And all we're exposed to in this society, mainstream society, is gender binary and sex binary. You know, again, more conversations are happening, but it is such a fight for the people who are like championing these causes and the people who are living these other identities and realities and sexes and genders. Like it is a fight. It is dangerous, you know? And so I think in order for us to understand like how, you know, bioessentialism is garbage, we need to educate ourselves. And that doesn't mean going to a formal institution, but pick up books about, you know, women in other cultures, not in like Western societies, you know, like go back hundreds of years to, you know, women in West Africa, you know, go to women in like Southeast Asia, you know, like study like matrilineal societies and stuff like that. And like understand that it's pretty hard to get rid of our bias we've had since birth, you know, in terms of how we've been told, you know, like the world is duality and it's gender binary and sex. And take that concept and be like, oh, this is how I was programmed. That doesn't mean it's truth. Doesn't mean that's universal truth. This is how it's programmed. Try to put that aside. And rather than projecting that Western ideal onto it, just see how these other cultures approach genders and sex. It looks different from our own. And I think if we try to look at it the way we've been programmed to think, we'll try to put it in our categories, but understand you can't put it in those categories, right? And so just expand in that way, I think is like a really good way to start changing our minds and looking genders are capable of and what different sexes are capable of and everything else.
Something that you say that it's so important. So let me just go back to that point. This is a struggle. This is a battle. This is not just about philosophy and okay, how was life back then, or how was life in Greece or in Crete, or it's about the struggle that so many people is going through with these labels. I know that as a woman, the label of not being smart, because that's the masculine, and not being driven, because that's the masculine, and not being, you know, like clear, because that's the masculine, has been a weight on my shoulders, because we have to prove that we can, that we know, that we are capable, twice as hard as a guy that is maybe less prepared, maybe less educated, maybe less driven. Yet again, it's like our measure is always in a disadvantage, because people consider women less capable. We still see women. Just today, I was reading this post of a woman that shared an article about economy and finances and the present crisis in investment. And so this guy said, "Oh, wait, but you have to know that, mansplaining the article." So she said, "Well, dude, that's what the article is saying." And he said, "Dude, read the article again." And she said, "I wrote the article." So that's pretty much what we women have to deal with. Whenever we bring something to the table, it is questioned, because our capacity, our skill, our intellect is still being questioned. It was just one generation ago in Mexico that women were, my mother had to be beaten when she wanted to study college. And that's in Mexico. In Afghanistan, wasn't Malala shot for wanting to study? So why? Because women belong to the house, because women are emotional. So our job is to nurture and to serve and to. That's the impact of these limiting beliefs. It's not just about understanding a religion. It's about understanding how that has an impact on the way in which we move in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. God, my brain just exploded into so many pieces based on what you said. Because I want to talk about like gender roles in Mexican culture, how important that is, and how as a white woman, it's very easy for me to say like, just tear down gender, just don't do gender. Because my culture is not threatened by tearing down a traditional family or tearing down traditional gender roles. And I know in other cultures, especially in the United States, for people of color, it's not that simple to just abandon your gender, because it means so much more than that. And I want to like actually hear your perspective and talk to you about that and everything. Can we do a part 2 of this? Would you be down for that?
Absolutely, that would be amazing. Yes.
Okay, because I feel like this is so like complex that I really want to do that with you, and we don't have the time today. More parts to this and explore like culture and gender and why there's that like locked in tendency and how that's like very real and very valid. And then and then maybe go into some other things there. But I want to come back to that.
Yes.
It'd be really good. I'm wondering if like maybe today, like closing out, I don't know, maybe we can like kind of discuss for a minute, like just some ideas of approaching spirituality and magic in a non-gender binary way for people to like start thinking about, because I think like sex magic, for example, right? Like sex magic is often a primary example of like gender binary, right? It's like the union of penis and the vagina, or like being very like genital based for your body, and that tends to come from a very like cis perspective. And again, I'm not an expert in sex magic or tantra or anything like that, so I can't go too deep into it. But kind of like one of my observations is, whether it's, I say, we put a lot of emphasis on the power of the reproductive ritual, how that is like the ultimate creation, the ultimate magic, and all this stuff. And so, a cis woman being in her cis womanness is the goddess, and a cis man being his cis manness is like the god, and that is it. And they're coming together is like the Big Bang, figuratively and literally. And like, there's just been so much emphasis on that for so long that people, like, quote unquote, in their power. It's not because they are man or woman per se. It's because they're just in their bodies and they have access to their bodies. And I would love if like these circles had more conversations, less about you are a true man or a true woman, or like, you know, for like trans men or trans women, you know, like the way we accept them and force them into certain binaries and whatever. And it's just like, you know, it's stressy, or like the language around it is limiting, and still it's very, very limiting. So I think just like having open conversations about people finding their power just from knowing their bodies, not because they subscribe to a sex and not because they subscribe to a gender. And subscribing to a gender can be part of their journey, of course, not to take that away, just not forcing them into it. You know, like for me internally, like I don't actually identify as a woman, but I belong to a political party of women, right? Because like I have certain life experiences based on how others perceive my body. I have certain life experience based on like how others treat me because of my body, you know, and all that. So I don't know. Yeah. So getting into our bodies and just honoring that, and it doesn't have to be man and woman.
Yeah.
Right. You can have any kind of body and do that. So yeah, like some like ritual ideas or magic practice ideas that are not about the binary that people could like shift into. Like I remember I was looking at alternatives for like Beltane rituals that were not gendered, you know, had nothing to do with like the man and the woman. And a few came, I wish I had to close out all my tabs, but maybe I can like find that and send it like as a link. Cause these students, I don't remember which university, they created, still honored duality coming together. It wasn't like man and woman or like, oh, feminine and masculine. It was like lover and beloved or something like that, you know, or like different like temperatures and seasons and like emotions, you know, like and I thought that was like an interesting way to like explore things. And then I was speaking to a friend of mine, and I can also send a link to their blog as well. They're an amazing thinker and writer and activist in all things gender. They were talking playing with each other, you know, and the differences of like energies of different planets playing together. So just like different ways of bringing different aspects of nature and the universe and thought and energies in their perceived duality, but not about gender, you know, and like merging those, and what does that create? So it's kind of my thoughts. What do you think?
I love it. I think that I work a lot with sex magic, and the approach that I love about sex magic and the practice that I do with Taoism is that it's not about the gender precisely, that the same practice that a woman does can be done by a man or by somebody that doesn't have the genitalia of a woman but wants to do that practice, right? It's just that energy moves. It's life force. I call it just life force. It's not feminine energy or masculine energy. It's life force running through our body. It's life force that moves and manifests in a way that feels arousing, because life is arousing, because life is sensual, because life has this quality of fire and water and softness and strength. And it's just like this ever dancing movement of energy. It's just energy moving and dancing in our body, whatever body it is. It can be masculine, feminine, or neither. Or both, because there are people that have both genders, like physically, they might have a penis and a vagina. And so it's about just energy moving through their body, whatever they have, however they want to feel it, however they want to enjoy it. It's about, I believe it's about having the ingredients, like when you prepare a recipe, and just blending them together in whatever way feels more tasty to you, adding more sugar or less sugar, adding more coffee or less coffee, adding cinnamon or adding, milk or honey. Just mixing your ingredients in a way that feels celebratory to your nature, whatever that nature is. Just enjoying, and whatever that nature is that time. I have been the one giving in a very, in quotation, masculine way to my partner. I have been the one that opens him in his vulnerability. and I am still me. I'm not wearing a mustache when I do that. I am not wearing I don't change my name to Sasho when I do that. I'm just me.
Oh my God, Sasho. I love Sasho. I want to meet him.
Right? So it's just me in whatever flavor I choose to cook that day.
I love that analogy. I love that analogy. And it's just like, I'm like thinking again, right? Like Beltane, because that's like one of the most gendered, like, spiritual rituals that a lot of people do. I know. Sorry, I gotta go a minute. Is like, what if instead of like, oh, if you're like, a woman today, or if you're feminine today, join this circle. And if you're a man today or masculine today, join that circle. What if it's like, if you are salty, be in this circle, if you are
caramel,
if you're flour, if you are chocolate chip, like whatever it is. And then everyone gets their little, and then we just like bake a cake together. We bake cookies together and then we eat them and it's delicious and like go from there. I don't know. Maybe the eating is like having sex, but however that works. I don't know. I love that. I love that idea, but I always love food analogies the most. So I'm biased. Okay. I have to go to this wedding now.
Thank you so
can
much
we please continue this?
Yes, we're going to have a second part, so stay put for our second conversation about gender and culture, which is so important. And thank you so much for joining in this conversation. I love you so
much. Oh my God. I love you, Sasha. Thank you. This is everything to me right now. And I hope it becomes everything to other people from listening to it. And I know I don't have all the answers, so hopefully collectively we can have this conversation and come up with some really cool new ideas and new perspectives. So I love you. Thank you for doing this work. You're a hero.
Thank you.